Hey listeners, this is Peter and welcome back to the History Shorts. Today's episode is brought to you by the podcast Republic, your ultimate listening app. Discover and subscribe to thousands of podcasts from around the world. Download Podcast Republic today, available on Google Play and the Apple App Store. Today on History Shorts. They came thundering across the battlefield, sunlight glinting of polished armor, their massive lances lowered, their wings screaming like an oncoming storm. To their enemies, it was the sound of death. To their allies, the sound of salvation. They were the Winged Hussars, Poland's elite cavalry, whose legendary charges turned the tide of wars and carved their place in history as the deadliest cavalry force the world has ever known. We will finish the episode with a history brief and a return to They Never Said It. A quick word from our sponsors. This day in history. On February 7th, 1812, English novelist Charles Dickens was born in England. Through works like Oliver Twist and A Christmas Carol, Dickens exposed the human cost of industrialization and reshaped the modern novel. On February 7th, 1964, the Beatles arrived in the United States for the first time. Their appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show days later would ignite Beatlemania and transform popular culture. Story of the day. The story of the Winged Hussars begins in the 16th century, during a time when Eastern Europe was a volatile mix of empires, kingdoms, and invaders. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, one of the largest states in Europe, was surrounded by powerful rivals. Muscovy to the east, the Ottoman Empire to the south, and the Swedes and Germans to the north and west. To survive, it needed a military edge. That edge would come from the Hussars, a transformation of an older Balkan concept into a uniquely Polish weapon of war. The first Hussars were light cavalry, influenced by Serbian and Hungarian raiders who used speed maneuverability to outflank their heavier troops. But by the late 1500s, under King Stephen Batory and his successors, they evolved into something far more formidable. Heavily armored shock cavalry, trained for decisive charges that could shatter even the strongest enemy formations. Their hallmark? Courage, discipline, and spectacle. Each hussar, you see, was a knight in all but name, drawn from the Polish nobility, or the szlachta, and bound by honor, prestige, and patriotic duty. They were the elite of the elite, you might say, a cavalry that didn't just fight battles, but really decided them. To understand the power of the hussars, you have to see what they carried into battle. The Winged Hussars were equipped with long lances, sometimes up to 18 feet, that allowed them to strike before an enemy could even reach them. Once broken in the initial charge, they switched to sabers, pistols, and warhammers, cutting through enemy ranks in close combat. Their armor was both elegant and functional, light enough to move quickly, but strong enough to deflect musket fire at a distance. But what truly set them apart and gave them their unforgettable name were their wings. Attached to their backs or saddles, these arches of wooden frames and eagle or swan feathers served no real aerodynamic purpose, but they had psychological power. When hundreds of hussars charged in unison, the flutter of these wings and the roar from their horses created an out-of-this-world sound that terrified opponents. Some historians believe that the feathers were designed to rattle or whistle. Others argue they helped deflect lassos or sabers in combat. Whatever the truth, they became a symbol of invincibility, angels of death on horseback. And when they rode, few could stand against them. Their greatest moment came on September 12, 1683, in a battle that would decide the fate of Europe itself. The Ottoman Empire under Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha had laid siege to Vienna, the heart of the Habsburg Empire. For 2 months, the city had held out against overwhelming odds. If Vienna fell, the road to Western Europe, to Germany, to France, and perhaps even to Rome, would lie open to the Ottoman conquest. And then, from the forests beyond the hills, salvation appeared. Leading a relief army of Poles, Austrians, and Germans was King Jan III Sobieski of Poland, himself a seasoned general and a man of deep faith. He commandeered roughly 70,000 troops, among them 3,000 Winged Hussars, his elite cavalry corps. As dawn broke, Sobieski surveyed the battlefield from the height of the Kahlenberg. Below him, the Ottoman camp sprawled across the valley, hundreds of thousands of men, cannon, and tents. The fighting raged all day, but by the late afternoon, Sobieski saw his opening. He ordered the largest cavalry charge in history. 4 lines of horsemen, Polish, Austrian, and German, began their descent, thundering down the slope toward the Ottoman lines. At the center rode Sobieski himself, at the head of his Winged Hussars. Eyewitnesses describe this sight as apocalyptic, glittering armor, lances leveled, and the wings streaming behind them like comets. The impact was devastating. The Ottoman line shattered under the force of the charge. Panic spread through their ranks. Within hours, the siege was broken and Vienna was saved. Sobieski's victory was hailed as the turning point of the Ottoman wars in Europe. In a letter to the Pope, he wrote simply, "We came, we saw, and God conquered." It was a triumph of faith, discipline, and courage, and it cemented the Hussars' reputation as the saviors of Christendom. What made the Winged Hussars so effective wasn't just their bravery, it was their tactics. They never charged recklessly. Their attacks were timed with precision, slowly advancing in formation before erupting into a full gallop at the last moment. Their lances were designed to break upon impact, transferring maximum force to the enemy while allowing the hussar to continue the fight unburdened. Their horses, bred for strength and endurance, could maintain speed across rough terrain, giving them a critical advantage over infantry or slower cavalry. And perhaps most importantly, their discipline was unmatched. They drilled relentlessly, honing formation maneuvers until they could execute a charge with the coordination of a single organism. In battle after battle, Kirchholm, Kufstein, and Chocim in 1605, 1610, and 1673 respectively, they annihilated armies several times their size. At Kirchholm, 3,000 hussars routed a Swedish army of 11,000 in under 20 minutes. At Kufstein, 6,000 hussars crushed a combined Russian and mercenary force of 35,000. Time and again, their arrival on the battlefield was enough to turn despair into victory. They weren't just cavalry, they were a force of nature. But no warrior force lasts forever. By the early 18th century, the world was changing. Firearms grew deadlier, tactics evolved, and the age of armored cavalry was coming to an end. The Winged Hussars, once unmatched, began to lose their edge. Muskets and cannons could decimate even the bravest horsemen before they reached the enemy. New military reforms replaced them with lighter, more versatile cavalry units, the so-called National Cavalry. The proud wings and lances of the hussars faded from the battlefield, replaced by sabers, pistols, and practicality. But while the soldiers disappeared, the legend certainly did not. Today, the image of the Winged Hussars endures as a symbol of courage, faith, and defiance. In Poland, they are revered as national heroes, icons of a golden age when the Commonwealth stood among the great powers of Europe. Their armor, preserved in museums, gleams like relics of myth. Modern reenactments and films capture their charges with cinematic awe, while their wings remain one of history's most instantly recognizable symbols of martial glory. Even military historians acknowledge their unmatched record. For nearly 2 centuries, from 1500 to 1700, the Winged Hussars were virtually undefeated in open battle. Few armies in history can claim the same. The History Brief. The following comes from Paul F. Boller Jr. and John George's They Never Said It, published in 1989. James Otis. Taxation without representation is tyranny. These staring words, frequently quoted as the rallying cry of the American Revolution, came from the mouth of lawyer James Otis, it is said at least, when he was arguing against British search warrants called writs of assistance before a Boston court in February of 1761. But they may well have been the product of what historian Daniel Borstein once called posthumous ghostwriting. There is no contemporary record of Otis having uttered these words. Actually, they did not turn up until 1820 when John Adams mentioned them in some notes that he was making, and he may have been summarizing, not quoting, the gist of Otis's argument. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today and helping make this little show such a mighty success. If you're enjoying this show and would like to help me out with its production, you can always donate a few dollars at buymeacoffee.com or become a Patreon member to enjoy these episodes ad-free. Both links can be found at our website at www.historyshortspodcast.com. Have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you all again tomorrow.